Captain Marcus Chen stared at the holographic display floating above his desk, watching the same recorded message for the 100th time. The alien princess stood before him in shimmering blue light, her crystalline skin catching the artificial illumination of what appeared to be a royal chamber. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture he had learned indicated deep emotion among her species, the Xylorians. "Why don't you ever contact me, human?" she whispered, her voice carrying a melody that human ears could barely comprehend. The translation matrix struggled with the nuances, but Marcus understood the pain behind those words. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler Station, where humanity's desperate last stand against the Devourers had somehow turned into victory. Princess Zarathiel had been there, commanding a fleet of crystal ships that materialized from hyperspace just when all hope seemed lost. Together, they had pushed back an enemy that had consumed entire star systems. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes and leaned back in his command chair aboard the UES Defiance. His ship hung in orbit around New Geneva, humanity's newest colony world, but his thoughts were light years away. The princess had saved not just his life, but his entire species. Yet here he sat, unable to find the courage to respond to her messages. The door chimed, and his first officer, Commander Sarah Torres, entered without waiting for permission. She had that look on her face, the one that meant she was about to say something he didn't want to hear. "Sir, we've received another transmission from the Xylorian delegation. They're requesting a formal meeting to discuss the treaty negotiations." She paused, studying his expression. "And there's a personal message attached. From her." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The treaty negotiations had been ongoing for weeks, with human diplomats working tirelessly to establish formal relations with the Xylorian Empire. It was unprecedented for such an advanced alien civilization to show interest in humanity, let alone offer an alliance. Most species in the galaxy viewed humans as primitive newcomers, barely worth acknowledging. "What does the message say?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Sarah activated her tablet, and the princess's image appeared again. This time she looked different. Her bioluminescent markings, which normally pulsed with soft blue light, seemed dimmer. Her crystalline features, beautiful in their alien perfection, carried an expression that transcended species barriers. Even a human could recognize loneliness. "Marcus," she said, speaking his name with careful pronunciation. "I know you receive my messages. Your communication array responds with automated acknowledgments. I have given you everything my people have to offer: technology, knowledge, friendship. Yet you remain silent. Have I offended you in some way? Have I misunderstood human customs?" The message continued, but Marcus couldn't focus on the words. He remembered their last conversation 3 months ago in the aftermath of the battle. They had stood together on the observation deck of her flagship, watching the Devourer fleet retreat into dark space. She had turned to him with those 4 mesmerizing eyes and said something that had haunted him ever since. "Your species fascinates me, Marcus Chen. You fight with such passion, such determination. Most civilizations surrender when faced with the Devourers. But humans? You fought harder when defeat seemed certain. There is something special about your kind." At the time, he had been too exhausted, too overwhelmed by their unlikely victory to respond properly. He had mumbled something about duty and survival instincts, but she had smiled, an expression that somehow translated perfectly across species lines. "It is more than that," she had insisted. "I have studied many species in my travels across the galaxy. None possess what you humans call heart in quite the same way. You do not simply fight to survive. You fight for ideals, for others, for dreams of a better future. It is inspiring." That conversation had ended when urgent reports demanded their attention. Ships needed repair, casualties required medical attention, and the complex task of establishing first contact protocols had consumed the following days. Before Marcus knew it, the princess had departed with her fleet, leaving behind only a small diplomatic contingent and a promise to return. Now, watching her latest message, Marcus realized how badly he had handled things. She had reached out repeatedly, sharing scientific data that had advanced human technology by decades, offering cultural exchanges that other species could only dream of, and providing military intelligence about threats in the Outer Rim. In return, humanity's government had sent formal diplomatic responses, carefully crafted by committees and approved by bureaucrats. But Marcus himself had remained silent. "Sir?" Sarah's voice brought him back to the present. "The delegation is waiting for your response. As the commanding officer who made first contact, your input carries significant weight in these negotiations." Marcus stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the blue-green world below. New Geneva represented humanity's expansion into the galaxy, their growing presence among the stars. Without Xylorian assistance, this colony might never have been established. Their advanced terraforming technology had turned a barren rock into a garden world in mere weeks. "She saved us," he said quietly. "Not just at Kepler Station, but in every way that matters. Their technology, their knowledge, their protection. We've gone from being an insignificant species to having a seat at the galactic table, all because she chose to help us." "Then why haven't you responded to her messages?" Sarah asked gently. Marcus turned away from the viewport, unable to meet his first officer's eyes. The truth was complicated, wrapped up in fears he barely understood himself. Princess Zarathiel represented something beyond his experience, beyond humanity's collective understanding. She was royalty in an empire that spanned hundreds of star systems, possessed technology that seemed like magic, and commanded respect from species that had been traveling the stars since before humans discovered fire. What could he possibly offer, someone like that? What could any human offer? The question had paralyzed him for months, keeping him silent when he should have spoken, distant when he should have reached out. The communication console chimed, indicating another incoming transmission. Sarah glanced at the display and her expression grew serious. "Sir, it's a priority signal from Earth Command. Admiral Harrison wants to speak with you immediately." Marcus nodded, knowing that this conversation would change everything. Whatever was coming, whatever crisis demanded the Admiral's direct attention, he had a feeling it would force him to confront the choice he had been avoiding for far too long. Admiral Harrison's weathered face filled the holographic display, his expression grim beneath steel-gray hair. Behind him, Marcus could see the bustling activity of Earth Command's war room, officers moving with urgent purpose between tactical displays and communication stations. "Captain Chen," the Admiral began without preamble, "we have a situation. Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet movement in the Andromeda Spiral." The recording continued as Marcus found his voice, years of command experience helping him articulate thoughts he had buried for months. "But I realize now that my silence was selfish. You reached out in friendship, offering your people's knowledge and protection, and I responded with nothing. That was wrong, regardless of my reasons. You deserve better from humanity and from me personally." Marcus stood and moved to the small viewport, watching the swirling energies of hyperspace. "We're facing another Devourer assault, larger than anything we've seen before. Earth Command is sending me to formally request Xylorian assistance in the coming battle. But beyond that official mission, I want you to know that your messages haven't gone unnoticed or unappreciated. Every piece of technology you've shared, every strategic insight, every gesture of friendship has been treasured by my people." He took a deep breath before continuing. "I hope when we meet again I can explain better why your simple question affected me so deeply. Why don't you ever contact me, human?" "Oh, the answer is complicated, but it begins with the fact that you saw something in humanity that we struggle to see in ourselves." The message was sent ahead via quantum entanglement relay, reaching Xylorian space hours before his ship would arrive. Marcus spent the remaining time reviewing everything humanity knew about Xylorian culture, military capabilities, and political structure. The information was surprisingly limited despite months of diplomatic contact. The Xylorians were generous with their technology, but secretive about their society. What Marcus did know painted a picture of an ancient civilization that had survived countless galactic conflicts through a combination of advanced technology and careful diplomacy. They were explorers and philosophers, scientists and artists, but also warriors when necessity demanded. Their crystal ships could manipulate matter at the molecular level, reshape energy itself, and travel through dimensions that human science barely understood. Princess Zarathiel was unique among her people, known for her fascination with younger species and her advocacy for intervention in galactic conflicts. Most Xylorians preferred isolation, content to observe and study rather than engage directly with the chaotic politics of the galaxy. The princess had convinced her father, Emperor Kithari, to break that tradition for humanity. The question that haunted Marcus was why. What had she seen in that desperate battle at Kepler Station that convinced her to risk so much? Her father had reportedly been furious about her unauthorized intervention, and only the successful outcome had prevented serious political consequences. Yet she had persisted in her support for humanity, pushing for greater cooperation despite opposition from conservative factions within her own government. As his ship approached the border of Xylorian space, Marcus received a response to his message. The princess appeared on his communication screen, and for the first time in months her bioluminescent markings pulsed with warm, vibrant color. "Marcus," she said, and hearing his name spoken in her melodious voice sent an unexpected chill down his spine. "Your message has reached me, and I confess it brings joy to my heart. I had begun to fear that humanity's gratitude was purely governmental, a matter of political necessity rather than genuine friendship." She moved closer to the recording device, and Marcus could see the intricate patterns of her crystalline skin in greater detail. Each facet caught and reflected light in ways that created an almost hypnotic effect. "You speak of debt and inadequacy, but you misunderstand the nature of our relationship. When I chose to intervene at Kepler Station, it was not an act of charity. It was recognition of kinship. Your species possesses something rare and precious in this galaxy, something that my people have perhaps forgotten over our long history." The princess paused, her four eyes blinking in that sequence Marcus had learned to recognize as deep thought. "You fight not just for survival, but for principles. You sacrifice not just for your own kind, but for strangers. You dream not just of conquest, but of cooperation. These qualities are more valuable than any technology, more powerful than any weapon. My people have much to learn from yours, if you will permit us the privilege." The message continued with practical details about his expected arrival and the formal ceremonies that would be required, but Marcus found himself replaying her earlier words, trying to understand the depth of feeling behind them. She spoke of kinship and privilege, of learning rather than teaching. It was not the language of a superior species condescending to help primitive neighbors. As his ship crossed into Xylorian space, Marcus was greeted by an escort of crystal vessels that seemed to materialize from the fabric of space itself. Their beauty was overwhelming, each ship a work of art that somehow maintained perfect functionality. They moved in formations that looked more like a dance than a military formation, their hulls refracting starlight into spectacular displays of color. The escort guided him toward the Xylorian homeworld, a planet that defied every human understanding of planetary formation. Crystalline continents floated in an atmosphere that shimmered with energy, connected by bridges of pure light that pulsed with the rhythm of some cosmic heartbeat. Cities rose from the surface like living jewels, their spires reaching toward twin suns that bathed everything in an ethereal glow. As Marcus prepared for what might be the most important diplomatic meeting in human history, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to discover something that would change not just the war against the Devourers, but humanity's entire understanding of their place in the galaxy. Devourers are massing for another assault, and this time they're bringing everything they have. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. The Devourers were a plague upon the galaxy, a collective consciousness that consumed entire civilizations to fuel their endless expansion. Their technology was based on biological assimilation, turning conquered worlds into breeding grounds for their twisted hybrid ships. Humanity's first encounter with them had nearly resulted in extinction. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, his mind already racing through defensive scenarios. 6 weeks, maybe less. "Intelligence suggests they're targeting the core systems this time. Earth, Alpha Centauri, New Geneva, all of our major colonies." The Admiral paused, his expression growing even more serious. "Captain, we need the Xylorian Alliance now more than ever. Their crystal ships and energy manipulation technology are the only things that can match Devourer biotechnology." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of what the Admiral was asking. The formal treaty negotiations had been proceeding slowly, bogged down by cultural misunderstandings and bureaucratic procedures. But with the devourer threat looming, humanity needed allies, not diplomatic protocols. Sir, the princess has been trying to establish direct communication for months. If we're serious about this alliance, maybe it's time we approached it differently. Agreed, which is why I'm sending you to the Xylorian homeworld as our official representative. You have the best relationship with their leadership and, frankly, we're running out of time for conventional diplomacy. The transmission ended, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the weight of his new responsibility. Within hours, he was aboard a specially modified courier ship, racing toward Xylorian space at maximum velocity. The journey would take 5 days, even with their most advanced hyperspace drives. During the long transit, Marcus finally forced himself to compose a response to Princess Zarathiel's messages. He recorded it in his private quarters, struggling with words that seemed inadequate for the task. "Your Highness," he began, then stopped and started over. "Zarathiel, I owe you an explanation and an apology. My silence was not born of disrespect or ingratitude, but from my own limitations. You saved my species, my world, my life. How does someone respond to such a gift? What words could possibly express the depth of our debt to you?" He paused, staring at his own reflection in the darkened viewport. Stars streaked past in the familiar patterns of hyperspace travel, but his mind was focused on the alien princess who had somehow become so important to humanity's future. "I remained silent because I didn't know what to offer in return. You command fleets that could reshape star systems. Your people possess knowledge accumulated over millennia. Your empire spans territories that dwarf human space. What could a simple starship captain possibly give someone like you?" The landing platform materialized beneath Marcus's ship like something from a dream, forming itself from pure energy that somehow supported the weight of his vessel. As he descended the boarding ramp, the first thing that struck him was the music. The entire planet seemed to hum with harmonious frequencies that resonated in his bones, creating a sense of peace that was both alien and deeply comforting. Princess Zarathiel stood waiting for him, accompanied by what appeared to be an honor guard of crystalline beings whose forms shifted and flowed like living gemstones. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, and her bioluminescent markings pulsed in patterns Marcus was beginning to recognize as expressions of joy and welcome. "Captain Marcus Chen," she said, stepping forward with movements that seemed to defy gravity. "Welcome to Xylos Prime. I hope your journey was comfortable." Marcus bowed formally, as Earth's diplomatic briefings had instructed, but the princess waved the gesture aside with one of her 4 delicate hands. "Please, such formality is unnecessary between friends. Come, my father awaits in the crystal throne chamber. But first, there is something I wish to show you." She led him through corridors that defied architectural logic, walls flowing and reshaping themselves as they passed. The technology was so advanced it appeared magical, matter responding to thought and intention rather than mechanical controls. Other Xylorians they encountered stopped to stare at Marcus with curious expressions, their crystalline features reflecting fascination and something that might have been respect. "They have heard stories of the human who fought beside their princess," Zarathiel explained, noticing his discomfort. "You are something of a legend here, I'm afraid. The warrior who taught us that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it." They emerged onto a balcony overlooking a vast chamber filled with what Marcus initially mistook for art installations. Closer inspection revealed them to be memorial crystals, each one containing the preserved consciousness of a fallen Xylorian warrior. Thousands of them stretched across the space, their surfaces glowing with the captured memories of the dead. "This is the Hall of Eternal Service," the princess said softly. "Every crystal contains the final thoughts and experiences of one who died defending our empire. For 3,000 years we have honored them this way, preserving their wisdom for future generations." Marcus walked among the crystals, feeling the weight of so much accumulated history. Some of the formations were ancient, their faceted surfaces worn smooth by millennia. Others appeared recent, their sharp edges still catching light with pristine clarity. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked. The princess touched one of the newer crystals, and Marcus could see her reflection multiplied infinitely in its surfaces. Because until recently, this hall had not seen a new addition for over 600 years. My people had become observers watching the galaxy's conflicts from a distance, unwilling to risk our lives for causes we deemed beneath us. She gestured to a small cluster of fresh crystals near the chamber's center. "These warriors died at Kepler Station, defending your fleet against the Devourers. They volunteered for the mission after witnessing humanity's desperate courage. Your example reminded them what it means to fight for something greater than oneself. The implication hit Marcus like a physical blow. Silurians had died saving humanity, and he had never even known their names. His silence over the past month suddenly seemed not just rude but criminally negligent. "I didn't know," he whispered. "No one told me about the casualties." "I chose not to include that information in our official reports," the princess admitted. "Human guilt is a fascinating but counterproductive emotion. I feared knowledge of their sacrifice would paralyze your people with obligation, rather than inspire them to greatness." They stood in silence for several minutes, Marcus struggling to process the revelation. Finally, the princess spoke again, her voice carrying notes that his translator struggled to convey. "You asked in your message what a human could offer someone like me. The answer stands before you. Your species taught mine to remember our purpose. We had grown old and cautious, content to catalog the universe rather than participate in it. But watching humans fight impossible odds with nothing but determination and hope, we remembered why we originally took to the stars." She led him deeper into the hall, past crystals whose surfaces showed glimpses of battles fought across millennia. "My people explored the galaxy not for conquest or resources, but to find kindred spirits among the stars. We had given up that search, convinced that younger species lacked the wisdom to be true partners. You proved us wrong." Marcus stopped walking, overwhelmed by the weight of her words. "How can you say that? We're barely out of our own solar system. Our technology is primitive compared to yours. We still fight wars over resources and ideology." "Exactly," the princess said, turning to face him with all four eyes blazing with intensity. "You fight wars, which means you believe in things worth fighting for. You struggle with limited resources, which makes you innovative and determined. You clash over ideology, which proves you have principles you will not compromise." She gestured to the ancient crystals surrounding them. "Do you know what my people fought for in our last great war? Border adjustments, taxation disputes, the right to mine asteroids in unclaimed space. We had become so civilized, so refined, that we forgot what passion felt like." Marcus began to understand what she was telling him, but the implications were staggering. "You're saying humanity reminds you of your own history?" "More than that. You represent what we were at our best, before wisdom became an excuse for inaction." The princess moved to the newest section of the hall, where the crystals from Kepler Station caught the chamber's ethereal light. "These warriors died gladly because your example reminded them of their own highest ideals. They saw humans willing to sacrifice everything for strangers, and they remembered why the Xylorian Empire was founded." A new voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant with the authority of ages. "An interesting interpretation, daughter. But perhaps our guest should hear multiple perspectives before making judgments." Emperor Cathari materialized from what Marcus had thought was empty air, his crystalline form towering above them both. Unlike his daughter's organic beauty, the Emperor appeared to be carved from living diamond, his faceted surface reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Your Majesty," Marcus began, attempting another formal bow. "Please, Captain Chen, if my daughter insists on informality, who am I to contradict her?" The Emperor's voice carried undertones of amusement that the translator rendered as gentle laughter. "Walk with me. We have much to discuss, and I fear time is a luxury we cannot afford." As they moved through the hall, the Emperor spoke with the measured cadence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "My daughter's admiration for humanity is well known throughout our empire. It has caused considerable political difficulties, I must admit. Many of my advisors view your species as dangerously unpredictable." "And what do you think, Your Majesty?" Marcus asked carefully. The Emperor stopped before a crystal that pulsed with deep purple light. "I think that unpredictability might be exactly what this galaxy needs. The Devourers represent ultimate predictability, complete order imposed through assimilation. Perhaps it will take chaos to defeat them." Marcus felt a chill as he realized the conversation had shifted from diplomatic pleasantries to strategic planning. "Admiral Harrison sent me to request Xylorian assistance in the coming battle. Our intelligence suggests the Devourers are massing for a final assault on human space." "Your intelligence is correct, but incomplete," the Emperor replied grimly. "They are not targeting just human space, Captain. They are targeting every species that has shown sympathy for humanity. The Devourers have identified your kind as a dangerous influence, a catalyst that might inspire other races to resist assimilation. The implications of this revelation struck Marcus like a hammer blow. Humanity's defiance had made them not just a target, but a symbol. Other species were being punished simply for showing interest in human courage and determination. "How many species are at risk?" he asked. 17 confirmed, possibly more. The Devourers have never mounted such a coordinated assault. They clearly view this as an opportunity to eliminate multiple threats simultaneously. The Emperor's crystalline features shifted in what Marcus interpreted as concern. "Which brings me to my proposal, Captain. One that I believe will surprise you." The crystal throne chamber was a marvel that defied human comprehension. A vast space where geometry seemed optional and light obeyed rules that physics textbooks had never contemplated. The throne itself was not a seat but a flowing structure of pure energy that supported Emperor Caithari's crystalline form while connecting him to every part of his empire through quantum entanglement networks that spanned the galaxy. Marcus stood before this ancient ruler, acutely aware that his next words might determine the fate of multiple civilizations. Princess Zarathiel positioned herself beside her father, her bioluminescent markings pulsing in patterns that suggested both excitement and concern. "Captain Chen," the Emperor began, his voice resonating through the chamber with harmonics that seemed to emerge from the walls themselves. "My proposal is this. I do not merely offer Xylorian assistance in your war against the Devourers. I propose that humanity lead a galactic coalition." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Marcus felt his knees nearly buckle as the implications crashed over him. "Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I understand." "Lead how? Humanity has been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. Most of the species you're talking about have been exploring the galaxy for millennia." The Emperor's crystalline features shifted in what Marcus had learned to recognize as the Xylorian equivalent of a smile. "Precisely why they are unsuited for this task. Age brings wisdom, Captain, but it also brings caution. The 17 species threatened by the Devourer assault have military capabilities that dwarf humanity's fleet. Together, they possess enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems, yet none of them will act decisively." Princess Zarathiel stepped forward, her 4 eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made him feel as though she could see into his soul. "They are paralyzed by the fear of loss, by careful calculations of cost and benefit. Each species waits for others to make the first move, to take the greatest risks. Meanwhile, the Devourers grow stronger with every world they consume. But humans," the Emperor continued, "humans act when action is needed. You fought at Kepler Station with 17 ships against 1,000. Military doctrine would call such a battle hopeless, yet you engaged anyway. That decision saved not just your fleet, but revealed a weakness in Devourer tactics that my strategists had missed for centuries." Marcus struggled to process what he was hearing. "What weakness?" The princess moved to a control surface that materialized at her touch, and the chamber filled with holographic displays showing the Battle of Kepler Station from multiple perspectives. Marcus watched his own desperate tactics play out in 3-dimensional space, seeing angles and moments he had missed during the actual fighting. "Here." The princess pointed to a moment where human fighters had broken formation to pursue damaged Devourer ships. "Your pilots abandoned defensive positions to press attacks against wounded enemies. Standard military doctrine condemns such behavior as reckless, likely to result in unnecessary casualties." The display zoomed in on specific fighter squadrons, showing how they had darted between massive Devourer bioships like insects attacking giants. Marcus remembered those moments. The desperate radio chatter as pilots reported, ammunition running low and hull breaches spreading through their small fleet, but the Devourers interpreted this behavior as evidence of reserve forces, the Emperor explained. No rational commander would commit fighters so aggressively unless they had additional support prepared. Their collective consciousness began calculating for threats that did not exist, diverting resources to counter phantom reinforcements. The tactical display shifted, showing how Devourer formations had gradually pulled back from their optimal attack patterns, creating gaps that the human fleet had exploited almost by accident. Marcus watched his own ship dart through spaces that should have been death traps, somehow surviving because the enemy had prepared for a different kind of battle. "You confused them," the princess said softly. For the first time in recorded history, the Devourer collective encountered a species that did not behave according to logical military principles. Your apparent recklessness became an advantage because they could not predict or counter it. Marcus stared at the replaying battle, seeing it now from an entirely different perspective. What had felt like desperate improvisation had actually been humanity's unique approach to warfare, one shaped by centuries of fighting against impossible odds with limited resources. Every human victory in your species' history has followed this pattern, the Emperor observed. Thermopylae, where 300 warriors held a narrow pass against hundreds of thousands. The Alamo, where defenders chose death over surrender to buy time for others. Britain standing alone against fascism when all rational analysis suggested immediate surrender. The holographic displays shifted to show human historical battles, somehow rendered in perfect detail despite occurring centuries before first contact. Marcus realized the Xylorians had been studying humanity far longer than anyone had suspected. You fight wars you cannot win, the princess added, and somehow find ways to win them anyway. This is why other species simultaneously fear and admire humanity. You represent everything they believe they have evolved beyond, yet you achieve victories they cannot comprehend. The Emperor rose from his energy throne, his crystalline form radiating authority that made the chamber itself seem to pulse with power. The coming battle will require exactly this kind of thinking, Captain. The Devourers have adapted to conventional military doctrine, learned to counter every strategy employed by older species. They need to face something they have never encountered before. Marcus felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on his shoulders. Your Majesty, even if what you're saying is true, I'm just one ship captain. I don't have the authority to speak for all of humanity, let alone lead a galactic coalition. Authority is granted, not inherited, the princess said firmly. My father could issue a decree making you supreme commander of allied forces, but that would not make you a leader. Leadership must be earned through action and proven through success. She moved closer to Marcus, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber's ethereal light in patterns that seemed to shift with her emotions. You have already proven yourself to the warriors who died at Kepler Station. They followed human ships into battle against impossible odds because they recognized something in your actions that their own commanders had forgotten. Courage without calculation, the Emperor added. Hope without guarantee. The willingness to risk everything for principles that cannot be quantified or assured. These qualities inspired my daughter to intervene despite explicit orders to maintain neutrality. Marcus looked between the royal father and daughter, beginning to understand the political complexity of what they were proposing. You're asking me to do more than lead a military campaign. You want me to unite species that have been suspicious of each other for millennia. Not unite, the princess corrected. Inspire. Show them what they have forgotten about themselves. Remind them why they originally reached for the stars instead of staying safely on their homeworlds. The chamber fell silent except for the harmonic frequencies that seemed to emanate from the planet itself. Marcus walked to one of the energy windows, looking out at the impossible beauty of the Xylorian homeworld. Floating cities drifted through crystalline clouds while bridges of pure light connected continents that defied gravity. If I accept this responsibility, he said finally, what exactly would you expect me to do? I can't just order alien fleets around and hope they follow human tactics. You would do exactly what you did at Kepler Station, the Emperor replied. Act according to human principles and trust that others will recognize the wisdom in your approach. The coalition forces would remain under their own commanders, but strategic decisions would be yours to make. The princess joined him at the window, her presence somehow both comforting and electrifying. You would not be alone in this, Marcus. I have been authorized to serve as your liaison with the coalition forces, to help translate your strategies into terms other species can understand and implement. Marcus turned to study her profile, noting the way her bioluminescent markings had shifted to patterns he was beginning to associate with determination and hope. And if I refuse? If I tell you this is too much responsibility for any one person? Then 17 civilizations will likely fall to the Devourers, the Emperor said simply. Not immediately, perhaps, but eventually. They will fight defensive battles, trade space for time, calculate acceptable losses until there is nothing left to defend. The princess placed one of her delicate hands on Marcus's shoulder, and he was surprised by the warmth that radiated through her crystalline skin. But I do not believe you will refuse, Marcus Chen. You are human. Impossible challenges do not discourage your species. They inspire you to prove that impossible things can be accomplished after all. The War Council convened in a space station that had never existed before that moment, assembled from pure energy and crystalline matrices in the neutral zone between 17 different star systems. Marcus stood before holographic representatives of civilizations spanning the galaxy, each species broadcasting their presence through quantum entanglement networks that transmitted not just images but emotional resonance and cultural context. The Thorac delegation appeared as living mountains of stone and metal, their species having evolved on worlds where survival required becoming one with the planetary crust. The Zephyrians manifested as shifting clouds of luminous gas, their thoughts moving at speeds that required temporal compression to follow. Ancient keepers materialized as geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, their consciousness existing partially outside normal spacetime. Princess Zarathiel stood beside Marcus, her role as liaison, making her the bridge between human strategic thinking and alien implementation. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed in complex patterns that served as real-time translation, conveying the emotional and cultural nuances that even the most advanced universal translators struggled to capture. Representatives of the Coalition, Marcus began, his voice carried across interstellar distances by technology he barely understood. We face an enemy that has adapted to every conventional military doctrine your species have developed over millennia. The Devourers have studied your tactics, learned your patterns, and prepared counters for every strategy you might employ. The Thorac military commander, General Granite Hart, responded with vibrations that resonated through the station's structure. Human captain, your reputation precedes you, but experience guides us. My people have fought the Devourers for 800 cycles. We know their capabilities and limitations. With respect, General, that experience may be our greatest liability, Marcus replied. The Devourers know your capabilities and limitations, too. They've had 800 cycles to study how the Thorac military responds to threats. When your fleets engage them, they're fighting an enemy that has already calculated your every move. The Zephyrian warwind velocity of storms flickered with patterns of agitation. You propose abandoning proven strategies for untested human methods? Your species has been spacefaring for mere moments. What wisdom can you offer civilizations that mastered the stars before your son was born? Marcus felt the weight of their skepticism, but Princess Zarathiel's presence beside him provided unexpected strength. Her faith in humanity's unique perspective had already been proven at Kepler Station. Now he needed to translate that faith into strategy. I propose we stop fighting the war the Devourers expect us to fight, he said. Every engagement they've won has followed predictable patterns. Defensive formations, calculated retreats, resource management, acceptable loss ratios. They've learned to exploit these tendencies because they represent logical military thinking. He activated the holographic display, showing tactical simulations of human historical battles that the Xylorians had somehow managed to reconstruct in perfect detail. Humans don't always fight logically. We fight emotionally, passionately, sometimes irrationally. This makes us unpredictable in ways that confuse enemies who rely on computational advantages. The ancient keeper designated prime angle pulsed with geometric patterns that translated as deep skepticism. Emotion in warfare leads to catastrophic decision-making. Logic and calculation preserve forces for strategic advantage. Unless you're fighting an enemy that has superior computational power, Marcus countered. The Devourers process information faster than any individual mind. Their collective consciousness can run millions of tactical simulations simultaneously. You cannot outcalculate them using conventional approaches. Princess Zarathiel stepped forward, her bioluminescent markings shifting to patterns that commanded attention from all present species. Captain Chen speaks truth verified by our analysis of the Kepler Station engagement. Human tactical unpredictability created cascade failures in Devourer decision matrices that our best strategists had never imagined possible. She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show the battle from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Observe how human fighters abandoned defensive positions to pursue damaged enemies. Standard doctrine condemns such actions as waste of resources and personnel, yet this behavior convinced the Devourer Collective that reserve forces existed where none were present. The display zoomed in on specific moments where human unpredictability had created tactical advantages. Marcus watched his own decisions play out, seeing how desperation had somehow become strategy. The enemy diverted significant computational resources to counter phantom threats, the princess continued. This created opportunities that conventional military thinking would never have produced. Human irrationality became a tactical weapon. General Granite Heart's stone features shifted in what passed for thoughtfulness among his species. You propose deliberately making poor tactical decisions to confuse the enemy? I propose making human tactical decisions, Marcus corrected. Decisions based on principles rather than calculations, on objectives rather than probabilities. When humans fight, we don't calculate acceptable losses. We fight to win completely or lose trying. The Zephyrian delegation flickered with rapid pattern exchanges, their gas-form consciousness processing information at near light speeds. Finally, Velocity of Storm spoke again. Your approach lacks the safety margins required for species preservation. Total commitment risks total extinction. Yes, Marcus agreed simply, but half measures guarantee slow extinction. The Devourers consume civilizations that fight defensively, that preserve forces for future battles. They struggle against enemies who commit everything to immediate victory. The ancient Keeper prime angle projected complex mathematical equations into the shared space, calculations that stretched across multiple dimensions. Probability matrices indicate 73.7% likelihood of coalition defeat using proposed human strategies. And what's the probability of victory using conventional approaches? Marcus asked. The silence that followed answered his question more clearly than any statistics could have. Each species had run their own calculations, reached their own conclusions about facing the Devourers in traditional warfare. The numbers were not encouraging. Princess Zarathiel moved to the center of the holographic space, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that somehow conveyed authority and urgency. My lords and commanders, we gather here because individual species approaches have proven insufficient. The Devourers have adapted to every strategy, countered every innovation, overcome every defense. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed in sequences that created hypnotic patterns in the chamber's light. Captain Chen offers something unprecedented. A strategic approach the Devourers have never encountered. Yes, it carries risks. Yes, it defies conventional military wisdom. But conventional military wisdom has failed us repeatedly. She turned to face each delegation in turn, her four eyes reflecting the holographic displays surrounding them. I have witnessed human warfare firsthand. I have seen their willingness to sacrifice ships to save crews, to abandon advantageous positions to protect civilians, to charge into certain death for abstract principles. These behaviors make no logical sense, yet they achieve victory against impossible odds. Marcus felt the attention of 17 civilizations focusing on him, their collective judgment weighing his words and measuring his worthiness. These were species that had mastered technologies beyond human understanding, built empires spanning star systems, accumulated wisdom across millennia. Yet they were asking him to lead them against an enemy that had defeated them repeatedly. I won't lie to you, he said finally. Human strategies will require sacrifices that your calculations might consider unacceptable. We'll ask you to risk everything on plans that seem to contradict basic tactical principles. Some of you will lose ships, some will lose lives, and some might lose entire fleets. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle across the interstellar gathering. But if we win, if we actually defeat the Devourers completely, then those sacrifices will have purchased something no civilization has achieved in recorded galactic history: permanent freedom from assimilation. The princess moved beside him again, her presence somehow amplifying his words. The choice before us is simple. Fight as we always have and face eventual defeat. Or fight as humans do and risk everything for complete victory. General Granite Heart's massive form shifted, stone grinding against metal in patterns that conveyed deep consideration. Human captain, if we follow your strategies and face defeat, our species bear the responsibility for choosing unwisely. But if we follow conventional strategies and face defeat, we bear the responsibility for choosing cowardice. The Zephyrian delegation swirled in complex patterns before Velocity of Storms spoke again. Perhaps it is time to remember why our ancestors first reached for the stars. They did not calculate optimal outcomes. The assembled fleet defied every principle of naval architecture that Marcus had ever learned. Thorac vessels resembled floating asteroids bristling with weapons that could crack planetary crusts. Zephyrian ships existed as contained energy storms, their hulls shifting between matter and pure force according to tactical requirements. Ancient keeper craft appeared to be geometric impossibilities that somehow maintained structural integrity while existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. At the fleet's heart hung the UES Defiance, Marcus's original command ship now serving as the Coalition's flagship. The contrast was almost comical. Humanity's most advanced vessel looking like a primitive metal toy surrounded by technologies that redefined the possible. Yet every alien commander had accepted human strategic authority, betting their civilization's survival on the unpredictable creativity of Earth's newest spacefaring species, Princess Zarathiel, materialized on the Defiance's bridge through a transportation method that Marcus's science officers had given up trying to understand. Her crystalline form reflected the tactical displays surrounding them, creating a kaleidoscope effect that somehow enhanced rather than distracted from the information being presented. Final reports from all Coalition fleets, she announced, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with data streams that bypassed normal communication channels. 17 species, 4,732 vessels, combined firepower sufficient to sterilize entire star systems. Marcus nodded, studying the holographic display that showed their fleet's position relative to the approaching Devourer armada. Long-range sensors painted a terrifying picture. Biological ships the size of small moons, escort swarms that numbered in the tens of thousands, and support vessels that appeared to be mobile weapons platforms capable of devastating entire worlds. And intelligence on the enemy force? He asked. Unprecedented in scale and coordination, the princess replied grimly. The Devourers have committed resources from across their entire empire. This is not a regional assault but a coordinated attempt to eliminate every species that has shown resistance to assimilation. Commander Sarah Torres, now serving as Marcus's chief of staff for the Coalition forces, highlighted specific areas of the enemy formation. They're not just targeting military assets. Intelligence suggests they're bringing assimilation processors, biological conversion units designed to transform entire planetary populations into devourer biomass. The implications sent a chill through the bridge crew. The Devourers weren't planning to simply conquer opposing civilizations. They intended to erase them entirely, converting every living being into extensions of their collective consciousness. Which means they've committed to total victory, Marcus observed. No retreat, no negotiated settlement, no possibility of achieving a partial success. They either win completely or lose everything. Princess Zarathiel's four eyes focused on him with an intensity that made the air around them seem to shimmer. An all-or-nothing approach. How very human of them. Marcus couldn't help but smile at the irony. Maybe they've been studying us longer than we thought. The question is whether they understand what they're copying. The tactical display updated as scouts reported the Devourer fleet's approach vector. They were moving in perfect formations, their biological ships coordinating through quantum entanglement networks that allowed instantaneous communication across impossible distances. Every vessel moved with mechanical precision, following patterns that computer analysis suggested represented optimal tactical deployment. There's our first advantage, Marcus said, pointing to the enemy formations. They're fighting logically, using proven tactics that have worked against every opponent they've previously encountered. They expect us to respond with conventional defensive strategies. He activated the fleet-wide communication system, his voice reaching commanders across 17 different species through translation matrices that somehow conveyed not just words, but emotional resonance. Coalition forces. This is Admiral Chen with final tactical briefings. The promotion had been ceremonial, granted by unanimous consent of all participating civilizations, but it carried weight that still amazed him. The enemy approaches in perfect formations, following optimal mathematical principles for space combat. They have superior numbers, superior firepower, and superior coordination. He paused, letting the sobering reality settle across thousands of alien minds, which is exactly why we're going to ignore conventional wisdom and do something they've never seen before. The tactical display shifted, showing the Coalition fleet breaking into smaller groups that appeared to violate every principle of mutual support and concentrated firepower. Human vessels scattered throughout the formation like seeds in the wind, each one assigned to coordinate with alien commanders who had never worked together before. Phase 1. We're going to appear to panic, Marcus announced. All fleets will break formation and scatter as if we're retreating in disorder. Make it look chaotic, desperate, uncoordinated. Sell the performance completely. General Granite Hart's voice rumbled across the communication channel, his species' natural skepticism evident even through translation matrices. Admiral, this strategy places individual fleet elements at severe disadvantage. Scattered forces cannot provide mutual support. Exactly what the Devourers will think, Marcus replied. They'll pursue what appear to be easy targets, breaking their own formations to exploit our apparent weakness. That's when we spring the trap. Princess Zarathiel moved to stand beside his command chair, her presence somehow steadying despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. Phase 2 involves selective engagement, she explained to the coalition commanders. When Devourer pursuit groups overextend themselves chasing scattered fleets, nearby coalition forces will converge and destroy them, with overwhelming local superiority. The Zephyrian commander Velocity of Storms flickered with patterns of concern. This requires precise timing and coordination. One miscalculation could result in individual fleets being overwhelmed before support arrives. It requires trust, Marcus corrected. Trust that other coalition forces will arrive when needed, that apparent retreat is actually repositioning, that chaos is actually coordination. It requires fighting like humans do. Ancient Keeper Prime Angle projected mathematical models that showed the strategy's complexity, probability trees that branched into thousands of possible outcomes. The variables are staggering. Success depends on factors that cannot be calculated in advance. Welcome to human military thinking, Commander Torres added with dark humor. We've been making it up as we go along for thousands of years. The enemy fleet was now close enough for detailed scans, and the results were sobering. Each Devourer bioship pulsed with organic networks that processed information at quantum speeds. Their hulls appeared to be living tissue capable of rapid regeneration, while their weapon systems integrated biological and technological components in ways that defied classification. They're beautiful, Princess Zarathiel observed quietly, in a terrifying way. Perfect examples of evolved efficiency, optimized for their singular purpose. Marcus studied the approaching armada, noting how each vessel moved in perfect harmony with its neighbors. That perfection is their weakness. They're so optimized for logical warfare that they can't adapt quickly to illogical opposition. The communication board lit up with reports from scout ships, confirming that the Devourer fleet was maintaining formation and speed. No deviations, no surprises, no indication that they suspected anything unusual about the coalition's deployment. All fleets report ready for Phase 1, Sarah announced. Waiting for your order, Admiral. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 17 civilizations' hopes pressing down on him. In human history, desperate gambles had sometimes saved entire nations. Today, he was gambling with entire species. Coalition forces, he said into the fleet-wide channel. Remember that we're not just fighting for our own survival. We're fighting to prove that determination can overcome calculation, that courage can defeat optimization, that the spirit of exploration that brought us all to the stars is stronger than the force that seeks to consume it. Princess Zarathiel placed one of her crystalline hands on his shoulder, her touch somehow conveying confidence that transcended species barriers. The Devourers believe they are inevitable, she said. Today we teach them that nothing is inevitable when opposed by those who refuse to accept defeat. Marcus activated the tactical command interface, watching as 17 different fleet formations prepared to execute a strategy that violated every principle of conventional space warfare. All units begin Phase 1. Make it look convincing. The coalition fleet exploded into apparent chaos, ships scattering in all directions as if panic had seized their commanders. To Devourer sensors, it would appear that the Alliance had collapsed at the first sight of their overwhelming force. Marcus smiled grimly as he watched perfect enemy formations begin to elongate, pursuing what appeared to be easy prey. Come on, he whispered. Take the bait. The space around the Kepler Nebula erupted into the largest battle in galactic history, but to outside observers it would have appeared as pure chaos. Coalition forces scattered like startled prey while Devourer bioships pursued them with predatory efficiency. Their perfect formations stretching across light years as they chased what appeared to be a completely routed enemy. Marcus watched the tactical display with growing tension, each scattered coalition fleet now isolated and vulnerable. If his strategy failed, if the timing was wrong by even minutes, entire civilizations would be wiped out while pursuing a human gamble. Devourer Pursuit Group 7 is overextending, Princess Zarathiel reported. Her consciousness interfaced directly with the Coalition's quantum communication network. They're chasing General Granite Heart's Thorak fleet into the asteroid field, 60,000 kilometers ahead of their nearest support. Signal the Zephyrians, Marcus ordered. Execute convergence pattern Alpha on Pursuit Group 7. What had appeared to be empty, space suddenly blazed with energy as velocity of storms materialized 3 full Zephyrian combat wings directly behind the overextended Devourer ships. The enemy biovessels, perfectly optimized for logical warfare, had no contingency for enemies materializing from apparently empty vacuum. The Zephyrian attack was devastating. Energy weapons that existed as living lightning, tearing through biological hulls that had been designed to regenerate from conventional damage. The Devourer ships tried to respond, but their perfect coordination became a liability as they struggled to recalculate tactics for an impossible situation. Pursuit Group 7 eliminated, came the report from General Granite Heart, his massive stone voice carrying satisfaction that transcended species. The Zephyrians strike like ghosts made of starfire. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as apparently scattered coalition forces revealed themselves to be precisely positioned for devastating ambushes. Ancient keeper vessels phased into normal space-time, just long enough to unleash weapons that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Xylorian crystal ships emerged from hyperspace folds that they had somehow hidden within the nebula's energy patterns. Devourer Collective is adapting, Princess Zarathiel warned, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with alarm patterns. They're pulling their pursuit groups back, reforming into defensive configurations. Marcus had expected this. The Devourer's collective consciousness could process information and adapt strategies faster than any individual mind. They would learn from their initial losses and modify their approach accordingly. Phase 3, he announced to the coalition forces. Now we show them something they really haven't seen before. The scattered coalition fleet suddenly stopped running and began advancing directly toward the regrouping Devourer formations. No tactical positioning, no attempts to gain advantages of terrain or timing. Just straight aggressive charges that ignored overwhelming enemy superiority. Admiral, came Velocity of Storm's concerned transmission. This appears to be frontal assault against prepared positions. Casualty projections are catastrophic. Trust the strategy, Marcus replied, then activated fleet-wide communications. All human vessels execute Pattern Omega. Everyone else follow our lead and don't think too hard about what we're doing. The UES Defiance led the charge, Marcus's flagship racing toward a Devourer bioship that outmassed it by a factor of 10,000. Around him other human vessels did the same, each captain making decisions that violated every principle of self-preservation. The Devourer Collective, faced with this apparently suicidal behavior, began calculating furiously. Their quantum processing networks ran millions of tactical simulations, trying to understand why rational beings would charge into certain death. The only logical explanation was that the Coalition possessed weapons or capabilities that their sensors hadn't detected. They're hesitating, Princess Zarathiel reported with amazement. The Devourer fleet is actually slowing their advance, pulling back to reassess. Marcus smiled grimly as he watched enemy formations become increasingly defensive. They can't process genuinely irrational behavior. Their collective consciousness keeps trying to find the logical explanation for our tactics. What the Devourers couldn't understand was that humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of tactical impossibility. From cavalry charges against machine guns to fighter pilots ramming bombers when ammunition ran out, human military history was filled with moments when logic gave way to determination. All coalition forces begin Phase 4, Marcus ordered. Hit them while they're confused. The real attack began as the Devourer fleet hesitated, their perfect coordination disrupted by computational paradoxes. Thorak vessels unleashed geological weapons that treated space itself like planetary crust to be shattered. Zephyrian energy beings flowed through enemy formations like intelligent lightning, their attacks impossible to track or counter. Ancient keeper ships phased partially out of normal reality, becoming untouchable while still capable of devastating attacks. At the center of it all, Princess Zarathiel coordinated the assault through quantum entanglement networks that connected every coalition vessel. Her consciousness became the living bridge between 17 different tactical doctrines, translating human unpredictability into strategies that alien minds could implement. Devourer flagship is attempting to withdraw, she reported. Their collective consciousness appears to be fragmenting under computational overload. Marcus watched the massive bioship that served as the enemy's command center, struggling to process conflicting tactical data. Its organic networks evolved for perfect logical analysis, were overheating as they tried to calculate responses to deliberately irrational behavior. Send a message to their flagship, he ordered. Full spectrum broadcast. Princess Zarathiel established the communication link, her crystalline features reflecting the battle's chaotic light. Channel open, Admiral. Marcus looked directly into the transmission pickup, knowing that somewhere in the enemy flagship, the Devourer collective consciousness was analyzing his every word and gesture. To the Devourer collective, he began, his voice carrying across the battlefield to an enemy that had never heard a surrender demand before. You have encountered something you cannot assimilate, the human spirit. We don't fight because logic tells us we can win. We fight because our principles tell us we cannot lose. He gestured toward the holographic display showing coalition forces pressing their assault against overwhelming odds. Every species in this fleet has remembered something you made them forget. Why they originally reached for the stars. Not for conquest or resources, but for the freedom to explore, to dream, to become more than they were. The Devourer flagship's bioluminescent hull patterns flickered erratically, its processing network struggling with concepts that had no logical foundation. You offer perfection through assimilation, Marcus continued. We offer something better, the chaos of infinite possibility. Surrender now. Withdraw from our space and we'll allow you to exist in whatever corner of the galaxy you choose. Continue this war and we'll teach you why even gods fear the dreams of mortals. The transmission ended, leaving the battlefield in relative silence except for the ongoing combat between scattered fleet elements. For long moments nothing happened. Then gradually the Devourer forces began to withdraw. Princess Zarathiel stared at her tactical displays in amazement. They're actually retreating. The entire collective is pulling back toward dark space. Marcus slumped in his command chair, exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow. Around him, his bridge crew erupted in celebration, but he felt only a profound sense of responsibility fulfilled. Admiral, came General Granite Heart's transmission, this victory will be remembered until the stars themselves grow cold. You have given us something more valuable than triumph. You have given us back our courage. Similar messages poured in from commanders across 17 species, each expressing gratitude in their own cultural terms. But it was Princess Zarathiel's words that affected Marcus most deeply. You asked what a human could offer someone like me, she said softly, her 4 eyes shining with emotions that needed no translation. The answer is simple. You reminded us all what it means to be truly alive. As the coalition fleet regrouped and began the long journey home, Marcus realized that the victory had changed more than just the military balance in the galaxy. 17 ancient civilizations had rediscovered their own capacity for hope, for courage, for the kind of determined optimism that had originally driven them to explore the stars. Humanity had given them the greatest gift possible, the chance to remember their own best selves. And in a universe where such things mattered more than any weapon or technology, that gift would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The age of defensive thinking was over. The age of impossible dreams made manifest had begun.